The House finally stopped screwing around and passed the $1 trillion infrastructure spending package. Let's take a quick dive into where all that money is going and how it will benefit or harm small businesses. And if we are ever going to see any more idle money. All this and more in today's video. Hello and welcome to Stephen Carlson Show. I'm Stephen Carlson. I'm a tech entrepreneur, real estate investor, author, YouTuber, paramedic, and Bonnie and Clyde are currently hanging out by the pool. First, let's give a quick overview of where this $1 trillion is going. $110 billion is going to roads and bridges. In addition to construction and repair, the funding will also help pay for transportation research at multiple universities. $66 billion for railroad, and this funding is going to include upgrades and maintenance for our current rail system for both passengers and freight. But there is no additional money for any high-speed rail systems. $65 billion for the power grid. The bill would fund updates to power lines, cables, and provide money to prevent hacking of the power grid. Clean energy funding is also included in this part. $65 billion for broadband. This includes expanding the broadband in rural areas and low-income communities. Approximately $14 billion of the total would help reduce internet bills for low-income citizens. $55 billion for water infrastructure, and this is broken down where $15 billion is going to lead pipe replacement, $10 billion is going for chemical cleanup, and the rest of it's just kind of going to various things for drinking water in rural and tribal communities. $47 billion for cybersecurity and climate change. How you put those two together? I don't know, it's DC, they do strange things. $39 billion for public transit. This funding includes money to upgrade current transit systems nationwide and also build new ones, with a strong emphasis on new bus routes and other public transport systems for seniors and disabled Americans. $25 billion for airports. This allocation provides funding for major upgrades and expansions of the U.S. airport system, air traffic control towers, and systems would also receive about $5 billion. There's $21 billion for the environment, which all the other previous categories all had something for the environment, but hey, whatever. $17 billion for the ports. Half of the fund would be categorized to go to the Army Corps of Engineers for port infrastructure. Additional funds would go to the Coast Guard, ferry terminals, and the reduction of truck emissions at ports. $11 billion for safety. Appropriations here are to address highways, pedestrians, pipelines, and other safety areas, with the highway safety getting the bulk of the funding. $8 billion for the Western water infrastructure. We all know there's been a ton of droughts out in the western side of the country, so this $8 billion is to help kind of reduce some of those problems. $7.5 billion for electric vehicle charging stations. Now we know the Biden administration has asked for a lot more money, both in this plan and in other plans, but they have $7.5 billion to put charging stations across the country. There's also $7.5 billion for electric school buses, with an emphasis on bus replacement in low-income and rural and tribal communities. The funding is expected to allow these communities to convert all to zero-emission buses. Now on the surface, most of these sound okay, I guess, but of course we know the government will probably screw up implementation on most of this, and at least half will probably get lost to overspending, corruption, and greed. But that's kind of normal for the government projects. So no matter which party is in power, they always seem to screw things up and steal our money. In total, this is $544 billion in new spending, with roughly $456 billion left over for unspecified overhead costs of pre-existing budget items. Now, bringing this down to small businesses, how will this help or hurt? Well, this is where it gets a little sticky. There are no direct small business allocations for things like EIDL grants or loans, as we've found in some of the previous pandemic-based stimulus packages. But this is to be expected. This is mostly focused on physical infrastructure. There is a stipulation in the Act that states not less than 10% of the amounts made available for any program under this division, which basically says that they're going to allocate 10%, or approximately $54.5 billion, of new spending towards small businesses. But then the Act continues to say, quote, through small business concerns owned and controlled by socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. It looks like the same BS rules that apply to the EIDL grants, requiring your business to be located within low-income neighborhoods, or your business to be owned by a socially or economically disadvantaged individual. I continued reading to figure out exactly how they define socially or economically disadvantaged individuals. And the Act says, quote, has the meaning of the term in Section 8, subsection D of the Small Business Act. except that women shall be presumed to be socially and economically disadvantaged for the purpose of this subsection, end quote. So, per the federal government, if you are a woman, business is obviously far too hard for you to succeed without any of their help. So much for equality. It looks like unless you meet those criteria, there are no small business assistance in this plan. And most, if not all, of the $500+ billion in new spending are going to go to large, multi-billion-dollar companies instead of small businesses. The funny thing here is that obviously DC could care less about minorities or women, because women and minorities hold less than 34% of Fortune 500 companies' board seats. Compare that to 42% of small businesses in this country that are owned by women or minorities, with over 50% of that being African American women-owned businesses. If Congress actually cared about disparity, they would have placed that socially and economically disadvantaged criteria on the Fortune 500 companies. But they didn't. Why? Because this is all just an act to appear as if they care. But they would never do anything to piss off their billion-dollar buddies that finance their political parties. Anyways, I digress. Are there any provisions in this bill that will help small businesses no matter what your race or gender is? Well, not really. At least not directly. Suppose if you own a restaurant near a construction site, in that case, you might see some increased business from the workers while they're building the new bridge or whatever. But at the same time, you're probably going to see a loss in business because the construction is going to be blocking access to your business, making it less convenient for your normal customers to come in. So that might just be a wash. Now still, there is Biden's multi-trillion-dollar Build Back Better Act that may get passed. But the latest reports show that they've completely removed the $25 billion allocation for the SBA to offer more EIDL or similar loans and grants. So at the moment, it doesn't look like there's any new or expanded EIDL programs for business owners. And with the December 31st sunset of the current pandemic EIDL program, many businesses that are waiting for the SBA and the IRS to finally get off their ass are going to basically be screwed. So what's the status of your EIDL loan or grant? Are you like me, still in perpetual processing status on your portal? Comment down below and let me know. Also, don't forget to check out my website, www.open4.business, and register your business today. You guys already know all this, but it's a small business awareness campaign where myself, Aubrey Janik, Jamel Gibbs, Minority Mindset, Investment Joy, Rod Squad, Kenny Keller, Mark Moss, Christina Atia, Air Force Major C.W. Lemoyne, better known as Mover, and others are going to be flying around the country in a helicopter. Would you like us to land the helicopter at your business? Why don't you go to the website and register right now. Very thankful to all of our great sponsors, Auto Corner, Namecheap, Best Buy, ZipRecruiter, Dun & Bradstreet, Constant Contact, Unbanked, and others. Without their support, this nationwide small business campaign would not be possible. Thank you very much for watching. Please make sure you click like and subscribe. Doing so really helps YouTube algorithm. I appreciate it, as do Bonnie and Clyde that are currently, I can kind of see them through the window. They are running around in circles chasing each other around the pool. So thanks, and I'll see you on the next one.